You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with Ali Miraj, columnist at The Article, and Jasmine Cameron Chileshe, political correspondent at The Financial Times. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Financial Times leads with the expected applications by Finland and Sweden to join NATO after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in what it calls a geopolitical shift in Europe. And after Ukraine's victory last night in the Eurovision Song Contest, the Metro reports the country's president is insisting next year's show will be held in Kyiv. The Telegraph leads with a warning to the EU from Boris Johnson that the disagreements over the Northern Ireland Protocol are holding the government back from taking action over the cost of living crisis. That's also on the front of the Express, which reports the Prime Minister saying there will be a necessity to act if Brussels fails to reform the Northern Ireland trade rules. While, according to the Eye, ripping up the agreement risks sparking a trade war with the EU. The Guardian has news of a row between police leaders and the Home Secretary over what's described as a power grab to allow her to intervene in local matters and silence criticism from forces. The Sun goes with the Queen's 70th Jubilee celebrations and how actor Tom Cruise got the celebrations off to a flying start at Windsor. And the weather is on the front of the Star, which says storms are on the way and then a heatwave in June. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Ali Miraj and Jasmine Cameron Chileshe. Good to see you both. Let's start with the Telegraph, the front page, to do with the Northern Ireland Protocol and Boris Johnson. It's saying, as reported here, set to scrap parts of the protocol. Ali.
Well, look, it's extremely worrying, Gillian, that this gives the impression that the UK cannot abide by its international agreements, which it took ages to agree over many, many months. This was designed by Lord Frost in conjunction with his opposite number on the other side. And this is where we ended up. And now we want to drive a coach and horses through the whole thing, which will not only damage our international reputation, it will also potentially put the Good Friday Agreement in jeopardy as well. The reality is, if you're going to try and protect the integrity of the single market on the EU side and protect the integrity of the UK on the other, those things are mutually incompatible. There was always going to have to be a border somewhere, and the compromise reached was that border would be in the Irish Sea. Now, that was didn't go down well with the DUP at all. They thought that they had been thrown under the bus, and they have. And this is causing serious problems, particularly now since Sinn Féin is the largest party following the recent elections. But this tough talk is really damaging at this time. We really need a trade war with the EU, like a hole in the head, with inflation where it is and the cost of living crisis. And frankly, it's tough talk. At the end of the day, if legislation is brought forward by the government to renege on parts of this protocol, it's going to have to go through the Lords. It's going to be stuck there, and the EU will take legal action. Who knows how long that will take?
And yet this change in the protocol looks almost inevitable now. Jasmine.
Yeah, so we're hearing that this week it looks like the government's going to try to introduce new legislation to try to override parts of the protocol. Obviously, Johnson has set out the UK's position, and his comments have been widely briefed and trailed in the Telegraph and other papers. Now, they want to sort of make clear that they are willing to override parts of the protocol, but at the same time leave open the negotiating solution, negotiating hands the EU. And I think we're in a really difficult moment because actually, as Ali was saying, there is a huge risk that our reputation is really damaged by this, and that it creates the impression that we are a country that is willing to renege on agreements that we put forward and sign. And this could have all sorts of implications for our relationship with the Biden administration and parts of Europe, and notwithstanding the risk of a potential trade war as is increasing. So we're at a very fraught period at the moment. And if we do see the introduction of legislation, as we were just discussing, there is a possibility that there's backlash in the Commons, there's a backlash in the boards, that we're really seeing months and potentially years of Brexit wrangling all over again.
Yes, and the Eye pointing to the trade war, the suggestions that is the next stage if the protocol is overridden in whatever form, Ali.
Yeah, well, look, Maros Sefcovic, the vice president of the European Commission, has been very, very clear. These discussions have been going on for months now. And Liz Truss is clearly playing hardball on this. Presumably, the motivation is partly to position for a potential leadership contest, if and when that arises, to try and endear oneself to the Tory right. But this is a lot more important than trying to win leadership battles, quite frankly. And then on the other side, you've got Simon Coveney and then the Irish Taoiseach saying that they don't want to be collateral damage in an ongoing dispute between the EU and the UK. The reality is that if the UK wants to play hardball on this, it can. But then the risk of this is that there's going to be a border at some point. The Irish are going to have to potentially erect a border if they're going to stay in the EU to protect the integrity of that single market. That puts the whole entire Good Friday Agreement in jeopardy. And we were hearing about, Gillian, if you remember, all these technological solutions that were going to miraculously appear from somewhere. Well, it's been years. They haven't come forward. And now Boris Johnson is saying to us that the EU is preventing dealing with a cost of living crisis because of the Northern Ireland Protocol. So they can't give the same VAT reductions they give on the rollout of solar panels on your house or ground source heat pumps. I mean, really? Come on, let's get real.
Jasmine, what hopes do you have for his last-ditch attempt to resolve this, his visit to Northern Ireland?
I mean, it's not looking, I'm not feeling particularly optimistic, given that this is a combination of sort of months of back and forth over this matter. But I do think, from Johnson's perspective, I mean, there are many reasons for this to not end up in new legislation. And there's a real, I think, desire to actually find another solution to this, given that there's a lot at stake here. And also, I think the government will be very conscious that this is an administration that came into power and was elected on the premise of, quote unquote, getting Brexit done. Like, if we think back to 2019, there was all this back and forth over what Brexit meant and how it would manifest. And Johnson really, as part of his pitch to the public, said, we're going to get this matter over the line. We won't have to be talking about it anymore. And actually, if we are facing months and potentially years of back and forth over this matter, I think it will really chip into the credibility of the government. I mean, it's pointed to vaccines and Brexit as the two things that it's done in power so far. And if it ends up that we're back talking about Brexit and back to square one, I think Johnson will be very conscious of how that will play out in the eyes of the public.
We'll just move on to the Metro. Actually, before that, let's go to the Financial Times, their front page, and NATO. And this is the membership of Finland and Sweden in the making, perhaps the complete opposite result of what Vladimir Putin was hoping to achieve, Ali.
That's exactly right. So Finland and Sweden are sort of overturning decades, in the case of Sweden, 200 years of military non-alignment to seek to join NATO. It's not clear whether Turkey will provide its support, but it certainly is indicated that it won't stand in the way. And this is all on the back of Vladimir Putin's invasion on the 24th of February of Ukraine. I mean, you can argue whether it was right for NATO to flirt with Ukrainian membership going back well over a decade, and what that was likely to do in terms of Russian perceptions. But it's clear that Putin's aggressive act and razing of cities to the ground and killing indiscriminately of civilians has led to this action. And certainly, the problem we now have is, what does a peace look like? We've heard increasingly tough language from our own prime minister about the fact that Putin must be seen to fail. And the question I've always got around this is, what does failure look like? What does success look like? And I heard from interesting comments from the great-granddaughter of Nikita Khrushchev, who is the Russian premier in the standoff in 1962 with Kennedy in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And Kennedy was very conscious to allow Khrushchev a face-saving way out. And the question is here, if Putin's digging in, and there's sort of talks about even now tactical nuclear weapons maybe being deployed, which is horrific, even the thought of it, how do we actually manage ourselves down from this cliff edge that we're all on at the moment?
Yeah, very key question there, Jasmine, that Ali's asking. And also, we've heard from President Putin quite bellicose language in that those that are joining NATO, it's a big mistake and there will be retaliation.
I mean, the reasoning behind the decision made by Sweden and Finland to sort of, declare their intention to join NATO is very clear. It's obvious that, the situation has been escalating in the Ukraine conflict. They'd obviously looked around and thought, well, perhaps it's better for our national security interest if we are in alignment with NATO. But the big question for me is actually, does this make Europe safer, or does this actually escalate the situation? Because as you said, President Putin has been very clear about what his red lines have been when it comes to extending the membership of NATO. And I think the question for me is that obviously this is, even if they've declared, Sweden and Finland have declared their interests, it's not an overnight process. This will take time to get approved by all the NATO members. And so what happens in the interim of this weird grey area where the two countries have declared their intention, but they're not yet members? And I think that will be a question that, Western leaders will be mulling over in the next few days and weeks.
Yeah, indeed. And trying to find some light in all of this, President Zelensky is vowing to hold the next Eurovision Song Contest in Ukraine as they won last night, Ali.
That's right. They won with their track Stefania, which was partly Europop, partly rap, partly football chant with a chorus and partly flute riff, with quite a catchy flute riff as well. So, good for them. It's great that they were supported. And look, I think President Zelensky has been leading from the front. He's a comedian by background, but he's risen to the challenge. And he is winning the PR war. He's spoken at the Grammys. He's spoken to the UK Parliament, the US Congress. And he really is championing his people and showing great courage and fortitude. And congratulations to Ukraine for winning. And he's saying that next year it will be hosted in Ukraine and hopefully one day in Mariupol.
They did, of course, pit Sam Ryder to the position, Jasmine, but I don't think anybody's complaining, are they?
No, I don't think so. And I think it was the result that we all wanted. We've all sort of watched the conflict play out from afar. And I think there's a real sense of wanting the underdogs to win and wanting a win for Ukraine. And as Ali was saying, I think President Zelensky has really shown that, yes, obviously it's a ground conflict, but there is an element of, he's been very good at reaching out to Western leaders, Western countries, as Ali was saying, getting on the Grammys, sort of really putting forward the Ukraine's case to the rest of the world.
Jasmine and Ali, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, who's still got it in for Margaret Thatcher? Intrigued. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Ali Miraj, columnist at The Article, and Jasmine Cameron Chileshe, political correspondent at The Financial Times. Let's have a look at this story on the front of the Daily Telegraph. Just some more detail about the Buffalo gunman, New York State, who killed 10 people. Some more detail coming through about his manifesto of hate, Jasmine.
Yeah, I mean, it's really horrific what we're seeing emerge out of the US today. And it seems that the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, was one of the list of individuals named by the gunman who were on his hit list. And it's very clear now that the attack was racially motivated, and there was a sense of the individual in question wanting to take as many lives of ethnic minorities as possible. And I think there will be a lot of questions being asked of the US authorities, particularly as it sort of seems like he was on their radar. I think I've seen some reports that he had threatened another shooting in the past. And so I think there'll be a lot of questions as to whether or not he was on the radar of the authorities and what could have been done to prevent an action taking place. And I think there are going to need to be broader discussions about, again, the issue of racism and what can be done to sort of eradicate the beliefs and the viewpoints that wound up in the shooting that we've seen.
Yes, and also issues yet again about the gun laws in America, Ali.
It's depressing, Gillian. I mean, what can one really say? Is this truly surprising? I mean, how many more of these things do we have to see year after year after year? Between 1968 and 2017, 1.5 million Americans have died as a result of gun.
Oh, we've lost Ali there. I don't think he's going to... No, he's not coming back. Oh, we've lost both of them, have we? Yes, we have. We've lost... Oh, you're back. Ali, you left us for a moment there. You were giving us some very horrifying stats.
Sorry, Gillian. Obviously, the broadband line was disgusted by the fact that 1.5 million Americans died since 1968 to 2017. This nonsense continues. I understand Americans have got this deep-seated desire to have the right to bear arms, right? But when you mix that with mental health issues, in this case, blatant racism, and we're going to see what happens in the investigation here, but it looks like it was completely racially motivated. You wrote a 180-page dossier and live streamed the whole thing. It's like, how many more of these things have to happen for Americans to wake up and say, enough's enough? I can't see when it's going to change. So, frankly, all that we're going to be doing is hearing president after president condemning this nonsense, this horrific violence, and nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, it is very depressing, and President Biden describing it as a stain on the soul of America. We've just got time, Jasmine, to talk about the Margaret Thatcher statue in Grantham on the front of the Daily Telegraph.
Yeah, so this is basically a statue that was put up in Grantham, which is the late Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher obviously had links to the area. She had it's where she grew up, it's where she went to school. So there's a statue that's been put up, and it's basically been egged by protesters. And it's in some ways inevitable that when you have a political figure who inspires both love and hatred on either side, that statue would be a target. But it's striking that it happened so quickly. I think it'd only been up for, a couple of hours, and it had already been targeted. Very quickly, Ali, one sentence, any surprise?
One of the greatest prime ministers of the 20th century, and I wonder what she would make of the paucity of leadership on both sides that we have right now.
Ali and Jasmine, thank you very much.